Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us this evening. People are trickling in here, getting their audio connected. Welcome to the Compassion Consortium Film Discussion Night. My name is Rev Erica Allison. Very excited to have you all with us tonight. I just want to formally welcome you to our Compassion Consortium Film Discussion Night, and thank you for being here. Tonight, we will be enjoying an exclusive pre-release discussion with Keegan Kuhn and John Lewis, producers of the film, They're Trying to Kill Us. If that doesn't have you intrigued, just wait. The aim of this film is to encourage critical thought about justice by highlighting hip-hop artists and activists who speak about injustice in all of its forms. The film addresses food access and food deserts, nutritional and environmental racism, diet-related diseases, racial disparity of diseases, government corruption, animal cruelty, climate change, and ultimately how the influence of hip hop could save the world, which we already knew. We already knew hip hop could save the world, but they're going to show us exactly how. So co-hosting with me tonight, a couple of quick introductions, are our Compassion Consortium co-founders. Rev William Melton will be off screen tonight. Big hello to Rev William. Rev Sarah Bowen is here, and she will be offering the closing blessing tonight. And Victoria Morin is joining us and will be leading our interview section tonight. But before I turn it over to Victoria, I just want to share a little bit about the Compassion Consortium and also open some sacred space for our evening together. So if I could just invite you, let's begin by taking a few centering breaths together, settling into the space, into the present moment awareness. If you feel comfortable letting your eyes just gently lower a bit, we're just going to take a few breaths together. Into the heart, into the chest, into the belly, slowing down, settling in. And just see if you can drop into a deep listening of your heart. In your heart is where these longings live, where these whispers live, reminding us about justice, reminding us about our callings and what we truly care for and stand for. Just connecting with that place within yourself and opening to the generous sharing of our guests tonight and all the time we'll be spending together in this beautiful conversation. And one more breath just to anchor our presence here and our connection together. And when you're ready, just gently come back to the space. So I just want to tell you quickly, the Compassion Consortium, we are a non-sectarian, which is a fancy way of saying not affiliated with any particular religion, but we are spiritual and we are an interfaith religious center. We offer spiritual guidance, support, fellowship to vegans, vegetarians, animal rights activists, animal lovers, and all humans who care about and advocate for animals and for the planet. The Compassion Consortium was born out of the recognition that many people do not see their deeply rooted compassion for all creatures reflected in various houses of worship. And some have even left their faith traditions after seeing our innocent, loving friends excluded from the level of mercy that they deserve. And in many cases, they can be denied the possession of a soul. So here at the Compassion Consortium, we supplement this missing piece for people who are part of other religious or spiritual communities and those who are not. So we welcome participants from all faiths and none, and our official mission and the principles that we abide by are set forth in our tenets of agreement, which are all located on our website. A couple of things you can do to be involved with us. We offer regular monthly services. They take place on Sunday afternoons, usually 4 p.m. Eastern time, and that's usually on the fourth Sunday of each month. And our services tend to include some spiritual practices, musical reflections, meditations, prayers, loving kindness, a little bit of embodiment, and they're very interspecies. And we also always include spiritual conversation with a special guest. And today I'd like to tell you our upcoming service, our next Sunday service will take place on February 27th, where we will be joined by Dr. Milton Mills, medical doctor and Seventh-day Adventist. He's also a critical care physician in the Washington, D.C. area. Dr. Mills has served previously as Associate Director of Preventative Medicine and as a member of the National Advisory Board for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He has been a major contributor to position papers, presented by PCRM to the United States Department of Agriculture regarding our dietary guidelines for all Americans. Really hope you'll join us for that. It's going to be great, exciting, and Rev Sarah is putting some information on that in the chat. So now, for tonight, Victoria will be facilitating a discussion about the film They're Trying to Kill Us with our guests, Keegan and John, for about the next 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes or so. And after our discussion, the chat box will open up so that you, anyone who's listening and in our audience today, can submit questions that you would like to have included in the discussion. And Victoria will facilitate that. And we always wrap these at the top of the hour. So we look forward to enjoying this session with you tonight. Without further ado, I will turn it over to my colleague, Victoria.
Hey, Reverend Erica, thank you so much. Welcome everybody who's here tonight. And I'd just like to start with a little bit of poetry. Anything with a face, I don't taste. Anything with an eye or two, I don't chew. Anything with a mouth stays out of my mouth. And that is from will.i.am, American rapper, who's just one vegan in the hip hop community. And there are lots, and we are going to celebrate them tonight and celebrate the hope coming out of a lot of things that just should not be going on, that have been going on for a long time. And we're going to learn about this from two amazing filmmakers, two amazing human beings. They are John Lewis, Badass Vegan, and Keegan Kuhn, who are co-directors of a fabulous new film, They're Trying to Kill Us. So what they've done here is team up to tell the untold story of the intersections of diet, disease, poverty, institutional racism, food deserts, government corruption, and the collusion with big food and the pharmaceutical industry. So John starts with his upbringing in Ferguson, Missouri, and crisscrosses the country looking for answers from experts as to why Americans of color are getting sick and dying from chronic diseases at often twice the rates of white Americans. And Keegan Kuhn, you know his work already from such amazing films as Cowspiracy, Running for Good, and What the Health. And now, Phil, are you about ready to show the incredible trailer to this incredible film?
All right, sure enough, am.
To our conversation. Okay.
So this is the neighborhood I grew up in, right in Ferguson. A friend of mine was actually shot in his driveway, right there.
You put drugs in the communities, put guns in the communities, you put disease in the communities, put poor food in the communities. All these things are designed to shorten your life expectancy.
It's by design. It is not accidental that this is what's in the hood and this is what's over there.
There's actually an active hand in making sure that we living like this.
It's all about control, money, and survival to them.
Your death is not an expense to them, it's an expense to you.
They're trying to make money from us, even if it's at the expense of killing us. You just die slow. Your family just watches you die.
The alcohol industry, fast food industries, tobacco industries target communities of color.
Your health is not their main priority. They're trying to keep you sick.
We are in a state of emergency when it comes to our health.
Keeping people sick is very lucrative.
Now you want pills, now you want dialysis, now you want medicine. You going to the hospital on a regular to see your doctor. Everybody's getting paid, except you.
Big pharma and pharmaceutical companies are making billions of dollars off of all of us.
As long as they can make that dollar, they don't care if you live or die.
It's something about being here that's making Black people sick.
Everybody's getting paid, except you. You hurting.
There are more dangerous and harmful chemicals and products made for women of color.
It absolutely is a crisis.
They don't make a dime if you're healthy.
It's kind of like the dope gang. It is the dope gang. It's just a bigger gangster, the mob boss.
look at the hidden hand, you see that government is feeding the crisis.
We're fed wrong knowledge, sized all the wrong food.
It's about money over people's health.
If you can control a population's access to food, you can control the person.
Only about 8% of African Americans even live in communities that have a grocery store in them.
Because the deep root problem is the food.
Because poor diets kill more brothers than pistols. You know, we fighting for our lives. That's like Michael Vick's pit bulls.
As black men, we're dying off so quickly in so many ways.
It's here, pocketed in our communities.
They don't want a healthy population.
That is injustice, plain and simple.
The powers that be that are making that money at the top, they trying to kill us.
Welcome, John and Keegan, and thank you for making this amazing film. So I'm going to get my views so that I can see our two amazing guests as they speak. So welcome to the Compassion Consortium. I'd just like to get a little bit of history about each of you and how you came to live the way you do today, and then how you connected. So John, would you like to start us off?
Yes. So I guess how I got to this lifestyle, my mother was diagnosed with colon cancer, which we talk about in the film some time ago. And I remember talking to the doctors and asking, how did this happen? What's going on? And that's when the doctor's like, well, it's too much fried food, animal protein, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't hereditary? And he's like, no, this is a lifestyle choice. And from that point on, I did more research. I didn't go vegan immediately, but the more research I saw that it wasn't just, cancer, but heart disease, hypertension, all these diseases were related to this ingestion of animals. So I am one of those people. I know a lot of vegans, they always say, if you don't do it for the animals, you won't stick it out. And I didn't start off for that. But as time went on, I grew to know more about all the things that were involved in the movement. I guess as far as like how and Keegan and I met, we met through festivals. We always did festivals together. I mean, I knew of him, of course, because of his amazing work that he had already done. And then we just became real cool and real close through all the festivals we did. And then one day we just had a brainstorm of like, let's do something together. And then this beautiful project sprouted from that.
Wow, that's so cool. And Keegan, give us a little history on you.
I was really fortunate to be raised vegetarian. And my mom raised us with basically two rules, which was don't hurt anybody and question authority. And those are kind of set you up for a lifetime of activism and the road to veganism. And I was turned on to the idea of veganism through a political hardcore band called Earth Crisis, actually from New York. And they talked about animal liberation. They talked about the dairy industry and the egg industry, and how if you really wanted to walk this line of nonviolence, that veganism was the only way. So I've been vegan for 2/3 of my life at this point, actually. And super grateful because it has led me down this path of collaboration with amazing people like John.
Well, you've done some amazing work. We're also grateful for it. So let's look at this film and this topic. I think if you ask the average person, what are the biggest problems in minority communities, somebody might say food deserts, but the idea that the food is so crucial, and that wonderful line that Stick quoted about more people being killed in the hood by the food than by guns, that's shocking. Why do we not know this? Why isn't this on the news every night?
That would be mainstream media. They have a good hold on that. They like to definitely create the narrative that it is the violence, which that is a problem. We can't deny that it's not a problem, but there's so much money involved and laced into the food industry that the government makes money off of too, that they won't bring that subject up. So that's a big reason why you don't hear about that, because why would they mess up their own money? At the end of the day, it's a capitalistic society, and at the end of the day, it's all about how much money can we make. If it wasn't about money, I always say this, if it wasn't about money, there wouldn't be pharmaceutical commercials with 85 side effects that they name on the commercial. And then they say it so calmly, may cause death, but then they go right over that and then they just go into the next thing. It's all about money at the end of the day.
So give us the scope of the problem. What's happening in Black communities? What kind of food are people being offered, and what kinds of health consequences are coming as a result?
I would say that the food that is in the hood is being given to everybody. It's not like it's, it says Blacks only on the McDonald's or the Popeyes, but it's targeted towards the Black community. If you look at all the commercials, I don't care what fast food commercial it is, it's all hip hop laced. It's all the urban culture that they're using to do it. They're using the urban faces. They're not really using the demographic of the people that they're targeting per se, because you'll never see an overweight person on the McDonald's commercial. They'll never do that. They make it seem like there's no way you'll gain this weight by doing this, because everybody here is fit and living this great life and all of this. So that's the target. And the problems that we're dealing with, like we said, hypertension, heart disease, stroke, cancers, they're prominent here. And what is happening, I just saw a statistic that talked about Black males actually get prostate cancer more than women get breast cancer, but we don't talk about it. And then we talk about in the film how a lot of this food can actually lead to that problem, that complication. So there's so many things that they don't want to talk about, again, because of the money that's involved. But if you step out of the picture, the problem is we're in the picture, so a lot of people don't see it. If you step outside the picture and actually look at the whole scope, you get to see the problem right there in front of your face.
So how did you come to know that so many hip hop performers were interested in this? Has this been going on for a long time?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to been vegan 15 years, and I've been graced to know a lot of hip hop artists as well as athletes, and I've helped some transition throughout the time. And I knew, when we started this project, I told Keegan, I said, hey, look, I may not have the money to get this thing off the ground, but I got a lot of connections and they owe me some favors. So I'm going to call them in. And that's pretty much what it was. It was calling a lot of favors in, and, because everybody in this film was not paid. They graciously, donated their time and energy, and you can feel their energy in the film. They really wanted to get this message out. And so we're very grateful for everybody that was involved in the film.
So when you guys, and we'll move over to Keegan now, when you were first discussing how you wanted to package this, I think for those of us who haven't done a lot with documentary film, how much of it is laid out, how much of it is scripted, if you will, and how much of it is just, okay, we're just going to go look at this and see what happens. Bring us inside there.
Yeah, I like to write out my films entirely so that they're fully scripted, essentially. So you know exactly what you need. And that saves a ton of time on interviews. It saves a ton of time on logistics. It saves a bunch of money too, because you know exactly what you're looking for. So John and I worked for, on and off for about a year before we even started filming to make sure we had this story lined up perfectly and actually how we wanted to tell it. And obviously new things come up while you're shooting, but we had the film pretty well laid out. And that was a real blessing in that we could get it done a lot more efficiently than if we were just gonna, hey, we're just gonna make a film. And people do make films that way, but they tend to be very expensive and they take a lot longer.
And I will add that while that was the case, you never know what you're gonna get with each interview though. Like, we script out as much as we can, and then when you sit down and ask that person questions, you don't know what they're gonna say.
So what would tell us some of the surprises? Who said things that you weren't counting on?
Pretty much every single one. That was the amazing thing, is that you'd have people who, some of these people are, elite performers, and you think, okay, well, we're going to talk about these different things, these issues, but like how in depth their knowledge would be on food injustice or chronic disease or health disparities or any of these number of subjects was really phenomenal, because you don't necessarily expect that from someone who's a professional musician or professional entertainer. why would they have dedicated so much of their time? And it really illustrated how passionate the people in the film really were about this subject, that it wasn't just a passing thing like, oh yeah, I'm plant-based, or yeah, I'm vegan. It's like, no, this is something, intrinsic to my being and to my values, and I'm really well versed on it. So pretty much every interview was impressive with the breadth of knowledge people had.
Yeah.
Was there one interview that was the most surprising?
I would have to say 2 was the most surprising for me. One, I'd have to say Maya, because I've known Maya for a long time, and she's very into the lifestyle, but she was very passionate when we started talking. Like the stuff she was saying, Keegan and I we discovered this silent language while making the film. Like we would give each other certain looks, like, "Ooh, that was good," or like, "I don't know if we're gonna keep that," or like, there were so many different things. And the whole time Maya was talking, we were like, "Wow!" Like, "Oh!" Like she brought up some stuff. There are over 90 interviews in the film, so of course, everybody's interview isn't in its entirety. So we couldn't say everything, but she was just dropping just jewels the whole time. We're like, wow, okay, Maya, like, way to go. And I think Keegan will agree with this. The surprise, I would say the ultimate surprise interview, which you'll see a lot of him in the film, is T, by the way, a producer / artist who was just, the greatest example of, we knew this was going to be a good interview was we asked him a question. While I was doing the interview, I asked him a question. I said, so do you feel that artists have a responsibility to their listeners, to their audience? And the answer he gave us, like Keegan and I looked at each other like, wow. And he goes, I believe as an artist, we don't have a responsibility to our listeners, because as an artist, you're supposed to give everything raw, uncut, emotionally as you feel it. And it's up to the listener to decide that. He says, but as a human being, I do have a responsibility. And and when he said it, it just made so much sense. It's like, yeah, as an artist, when you go look at a piece of art on the wall, it's up to the viewer to come up with their own interpretation of that. And that's what he's saying is with the music. But as a human, he has responsibility to do it the best he can for everybody else and all the living things on the earth.
Wow. So Keegan, this was not your first film that dealt with vegan, plant-based kinds of topics. So what did you learn from this one that you didn't know before?
A lot. Yeah, this is definitely an education for sure. I think for John and I come from different worlds. I would consider John a brother, but we came from different backgrounds. It's like I come from the punk community, which has its own ethos and ethics, that have some parallels to the hip hop community, but not necessarily. Clearly I'm white. I grew up as lower middle class guy on the East Coast. Like my background just was so different from what John experienced growing up. And so it was totally eye-opening and also an incredible level of privilege to get to be in these rooms with, elite musicians and artists and athletes. But to be the only Caucasian person listening in on what I felt like were really profound stories and issues that white audiences don't hear, that white Americans miss out on. And so there was an incredible amount that I learned while making this film on many, many different levels. Obviously, the film is very heavily on statistics and facts and information, and it's a baseball bat to the head for the amount of information we're trying to cram in there. And that's just 1/100th of what I learned while making this film. But I think one of the biggest things, my takeaway, was getting to work with John for 5 years on this project and getting to be part of conversations that I wouldn't be otherwise.
Well, you said the magical word stories. Can you tell us one? Does a story come to mind, either that made it into the film or that didn't?
Yeah, for the stories that we heard, some of them were from artists and people we were interviewing were, truly heartbreaking what people experienced. some of them were, funny and seeing how people dealt with the struggles of their own upbringing. But there was also, historical stories that I wasn't aware of. Dr. Milton Mills, who's going to be on the next consortium, talked about the plantation diet and the historical link of soul food to slavery. And that was something, a historical story that doesn't get enough attention or doesn't get any attention. And then John and I have 1,000 stories between us of making a movie and traveling around the country.
We signed an oath, though.
Well, go ahead, John.
No, I was just saying, being stuck in a Prius for 5 years, you basically become family. So, we just, in all honesty, Keegan and I have been through a lot making this film. Like, people tried to bankrupt the film, literally, tried to bankrupt the film. We got letters from organizations that we weren't supposed to get, organizations warning their whole organization about our film and how, this could be a problem for their businesses. Yeah, I mean, you name it, we literally went through it. We had deaths in the family. We had to deal with, it just brought us closer, and it brought us to a point where we literally were a two-man team, and we said, you know what? We got each other's back, and we got to do this. We know a lot of people didn't want to, as you can see, there's a lot of people that didn't want this film to make it today. And you see it's not out yet. We're still working on it, but that's just how it is. It's so, while it's controversial, it's all factual. And so you see a lot of that. I would say also with what Keegan was saying, as far as stories, I would say stories that really stuck out to me, and I want people to understand this, and I've heard this narrative a lot of times, being a Black man in America, is that, just for example, Kaepernick, his story, well, he's rich. Well, why would he care? These people that are talking, they may be successful artists. They may be what they are. But not only did they grow up dealing with the issues that's going on, money does not stop racism. It doesn't stop, a capitalist system that isn't made for people of color, not even just Black, but, like we talk about the Native Americans and Hispanic Americans, things like that. I want people to understand that it's not just because you've been successful in something, and it doesn't even have to be an athlete or a musician. It could be a banker. It could be an investment broker. It could be whatever. You could be successful. I was just talking to a fraternity brother of mine today, and he was telling me about a story of his son getting pulled over, and it was a whole messed up thing because they thought the car was stolen, even though it's his dad's car and his dad's Black. So it was just a whole messed up thing. So it doesn't matter. I want people to understand that where the story comes from doesn't make the story false. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of people look at the source of the story like, oh, he's rich. He doesn't have to deal with this. Yeah, he does. And he probably still has family, or she has family that still has to deal with this too.
So do you get backlash only from organizations, companies that might lose something or lose money if this information gets out? Or do you find that just regular people are also saying, oh, okay, come on, don't tell me what to eat? What sort of response have you gotten all around?
All around, everybody from vegans to even vegans try to give me crap about just, there are a lot of, okay, and Keegan can attest for this, and I know this might come as a shock, there's racism in veganism. Some people think just because a person's vegan that they're not racist. It's no, you can go and just watch people's comments and what they say. And sometimes I do, poke the barrel. I won't say bear. I'm working on not using animals. I poke the barrel to see what happens. But I do it on purpose so other people can see, what's going on behind the scenes. And you will always get people to come through and say certain things, but whether it's vegans or I do get from time to time meat eaters that think it's false, think it's a lie. They think veganism is this new age cult. I've heard that a lot of times. And then I have to point out that veganism has been going on since the beginning of time. It just didn't have the coined name veganism. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten it from gun rights activists to whatever. Keegan gets a little bit of it, but I kind of put my face out there and just like, you know what, I'll be the punching bag. Just go ahead. But yeah, definitely from all sources. Even in the Black community, you know, it's not just a white community. Veganism touches a lot of hurt souls.
What a great phrase. Veganism touches a lot of hurt souls. It really does. It's like an open wound for some people. So I'd like to hear from both of you. Who's on the other side? Who are your fans? I know you had distribution, you know, just private distribution for a while. So some people have seen the full film. What have you heard from the people who loved it?
I'll let you go with that, Keegan.
Yeah, we did a short 10-day kind of preview screening online, and the feedback we got was incredible. You know, we had so many emails, so many comments, so many people letting us know that this film changed their life and that, you know, their entire family was going vegan because of it. That they never thought that their diabetes was in their control, or that, you know, heart disease ran in their family. And so of course they were going to get heart disease, and realizing that it wasn't, that their diet had more to do with it than their DNA, as Eric Adams says. Yeah, the feedback has been phenomenal. And so we're still in the process of working out you know, mainstream distribution, getting this film into a major platform to make it as accessible as possible. And there's some things on the table right now that we're excited about. But yeah, you know, getting the film out, because we know when people see it, they're going to be changed. And the feedback that the film got, there was so little hate that the film got for those who saw it. And so that was really encouraging that people can judge from the trailer, they're thinking it's one thing, and then when they finally see it, they realize, oh, there's so much more to the story.
Oh, it's an incredible film. I was able to see it, and there's so much heart and there's so much information. It's one of these films where just every couple of seconds, it's like, seriously? Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I mean, it's really, you know, it's a continual eye opener. So not to make anybody too anxious for when the distribution happens, but you'll want to watch it the first day. So Keegan, I see behind you the key art for this film, which is really powerful. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that was a concept. I think, John, you came up with that, right? Yeah, that was
the only idea I had in the film, though, was just
yeah, it's a gun made up of the paraphernalia of this industry, and this industry being, you know, pharmaceuticals and meat and, you know, soda and junk food, and how it's all connected together. But, you know, it's also handcuffs, and it's the police, and it's this institutionalized racist system that, you know, predates on Americans of color in particular. And, you know, we went with a very provocative film title, again, that John came up with. You know, they're trying to kill us. Like, if that doesn't make you want to click on it and be like, well, who's they? And really? And I think we make a pretty strong argument in the film that there is a concerted effort to, at very least, keep Americans of color sick.
And so, John, explain that to us. Are we talking, is it just economic reasons, or does it go deeper than that?
You mean as far as like why they're trying to kill us?
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's one of the reasons that I believe that people don't think about is that, you know, there's DNA passed down through bloodlines, but there's also trauma that's passed down through bloodlines. And with that trauma, the people that cause the trauma, that's also passed down through bloodlines. And it's unspoken rule, but it's taught. It happens in all families. Just like Black people have to tell their kids and teach them different lessons. Hey, you shouldn't be out here past 7. Don't go over on the east side. You know, the cops over there, they don't like to see you. If you're walking, take your hoodie off. There's certain rules. There's also certain conversations that happen in other families and in other businesses. And while I always say this, and it's an unwritten rule, but it happens all over the place. People don't like to talk about it, but it happens in companies as well. Because these companies, these government bodies, while they weren't around when all these rules and regulations were formed, who's out there right now that's trying to stop these rules and regulations? They're still letting them go by. These companies, these cigarette companies are still in business. These alcohol companies are still in business. It's all tied together, and they're still allowing the same thing to go on and on. Nobody can tell me one medical benefit from a cigarette right now. Is it still being sold? You can't tell me, and you might love wine. I'm not here to knock wine drinkers, but literally, what actual medical benefit does alcohol have? And even further, what cigarette company or what alcohol company has contributed one dime to progressing lower income communities? But where are they predominantly set up? Lower income communities. It's passed down over generation over generation. They're not looking to help. They're just looking to suck it dry. And when they suck it dry, they just take the store and move it to another community that they can just leech off of again. So they is such a wide group of people. But if you really look at it, it's been passed down through generation and generation. Just like the trauma, the people that inflict the trauma, they pass that down too.
Fascinating. So because the Compassion Consortium is a spiritual organization, I want to ask a question. This didn't come out in your film, but I'm wondering if you have information on this. When we look at historical footage from the civil rights movement, it just seems that the church was so involved there. And we still see a lot of contributions from the Black church in that community. And how much do the churches know about what's going on diet-wise? Are they doing anything? And if they did know, what could they be doing?
From what I know, there are some churches that have, tried to implement it, but you also have to realize that, and this is not to offend anybody again, you also got to realize that a lot of churches in today's society, in the Black community, were influenced by the white slave owners that kind of taught them this. So just for an example, I went to my uncle's funeral, who I mentioned him in the film. I went to my uncle's funeral and everybody, it was so crazy. We're sitting at the table and we're at the repast and everybody's like, man, if he could have just changed the way he ate and if he would have done this and did this. And everybody's like really having this heart-to-heart conversation. And as soon as they said the food was ready, it's like the conversation dropped and they rushed to line. And it was nothing but Popeye's chicken and other crap, and for a lack of a better word. So it's like, we really have to dive deep. Again, that trauma's been passed down. Like we talked about the slave food diet, that was passed down along with the church and what they ate as well. So there hasn't been much of the churches implementing a plant-based way of eating.
So I want to ask you about the solution. So what's happening? I know that you're talking a lot about the contribution of hip hop. So tell us about that. And just, I have read that the fastest growing demographic in the vegan world is Black women. So, and I think of Black women as having a lot of influence. And so things have to be changing. Are you excited? What are you seeing?
Yeah, very excited. I'm very excited for the change. I think that the vegan community in itself has to remember that change takes time. Like I'm eager. Like, do I want the whole world to be vegan? Yes, I want to be vegan like 2 years ago. But I also understand it takes time. It takes convincing. It takes the eye-opening events to happen to them. I never hide this. I was a butcher at one point, but I had to go through a series of life events to get there. You know what I'm saying? And there's so many people out there that have to go through other events to see that. And as far as Black women being the largest, like I guess demographic that's converting over, I think that's because Black women see themselves as the caretaker of the family. And once they start to see like, wow, I'm really actually doing harm to my children instead of helping them. Once that triggers, no mother, Black, white, whatever, wants to be the cause of their child's demise. You know what I'm saying? There's one thing if you have to watch your child go through a traumatic event and you can't do anything about it. But once you see that you actually are in control of that and you can do something about it, that changes your whole view on it. So I think that's why you're seeing a big thing with that. And I'm sorry, I think you said something about hip hop as well with the
Yeah,
question.
just I think when some people first see the trailer, it's like, oh, wait a minute, it's a juxtaposition that a lot of people haven't thought of. I mean, and I've spoken with people who are really into hip hop, and they've never heard of hip hop as green, for instance, or any of these kind of vegan connections. They know some of the artists are vegan, but the idea that it's part of the culture, I'm not sure is out there to the degree that we would like it to be.
Yeah, it's definitely not out there, but I do believe that people are seeing it. And you're seeing more mainstream hip hop artists that are converting over, because some of it may be vanity. They want to prolong their career, and they understand that this is a way to prolong life and career. And some of it actually is health. They're seeing it like, you got to understand that the entertainment industry, period, is laden with bad food, drugs, smoking, drinking. And they're like, well, and we see a lot of our entertainers passing away early. And so they don't want to be a part of that either. So that's helping with the conversion. It's like, well, I see my friend who I just talked to yesterday, who was on the top of his game or her game, passing away. I don't want to be a part of that. And so that's actually helping with it too. And there is a sense of, like T by the way said, there is a sense of responsibility. Like as an artist, they don't necessarily see a responsibility with that. But if you talk to a lot of these artists outside of their persona, what they're portraying to the entertainment world, a lot of these people actually care about their listeners and their viewers. They really do. So they're showing that responsibility too.
Yeah, that's very cool. So Keegan, John mentioned the way that the film also looks at what's going on in Native American culture. And this was a complete eye-opener to me. I didn't understand what was going on food-wise on Native American reservations. Can you fill us in a little bit?
Yeah, sadly, food deserts disproportionately affect African Americans, but they even more disproportionately affect Indigenous Americans. And Indigenous Americans, particularly people who are living on their ancestral homelands, have less access to healthy food. So Navajo Nation, for example, which is the largest Indigenous reservation in the United States, largest population too, has only about 13 grocery stores for the entire area. And the area is about the size of West Virginia. And you just look at the historical, use of food as a weapon. The U.S. government used food scarcity and food insecurity as a tool of control. They did it with enslaved Africans, and they did it with the Indigenous Americans. They would burn people's crops, and they would force them off their lands. And then once they, destroy someone's food source, then they're dependent on the U.S. government for their food. And so we see this today still, where people are on government assistance food programs. Some of the highest rates are for Indigenous Americans. And then you look at what are those foods, and they're, all white. They're white foods. It's white rice, white milk, white bread, and highly processed. And so you see these incredible rates of diabetes. In Navajo Nation, I live in what is Arizona, which is a part of Navajo Nation, takes up Arizona. And Navajo Nation has some of the highest diabetes rates in the entire state. This is part of the colonial tool, right, of oppression and keeping people down and subjugated. Is if people are hungry and if people are concerned about where they're going to get their next meal, well, it's very easy to control those people. It's very easy to control entire populations. So that's one aspect of the film, and showing that food can be used as a tool of oppression and a tool of violence, and it's still to this day. Cities will allow more fast food stores and liquor stores and gun shops and tobacco shops in communities of color than they will allow in white communities. And it's like city council members are making those decisions, city planners are making those decisions. And it's the same thing too. It's like, why is it that Indigenous communities they'll have 100 convenience stores, but they only have one grocery store? And you look at, well, who's running those businesses? It's outside companies, and the big grocery store chains don't want to do business in those communities. Why? And it's the systemic racism. So it goes layer and layer deep. And that's the reason why the film is 108 minutes long. It is jam-packed, and we try and go as deep as we can while, keeping an audience engaged.
Well, you do that. That was some of the fastest 108 minutes I have ever lived through. Utterly fascinating. So I'm going to ask you, as we wind down our Q&A, which we are about to start, how people can see it, what's going on with the distribution, what's coming up. But right now, let's just open this up to everybody who's here. You can put your question in the chat, or if you would like to talk with our guests, you can raise your electronic hand. I'm going to go into gallery view so I can see all those hands. Phil.
Hey, you knew I had to get it on this. Hey, Phil, for representing over here. I teach in Harlem, and like I always said, this is a film. I saw this at the Tribeca Film Festival, and it floored me completely. It's like every single second. But I think one of the things that stood out the most, and not a spoiler alert for anybody that checks this out, there's a scene where you guys go to a pig farm, and then the guy says, this used to be like a tobacco plantation, and they were making their money from that, and then they wind it down, and now they're just selling all this pig, and this is where all the money is now. And he's laughing about it like, this is money. And he doesn't even see the irony that he's being interviewed by you guys, and he's just like, there ain't no shame in his game, because he knows he's going to get that money. And it's just like, I'm sitting there like, everybody in the world needs to see this. My question is, what is this kind of this thing going on where people, like you were talking about the funeral and situations like this, that people could understand, like people presenting, here's the information, but they can't connect it to themselves, or like even in the hip hop community, like with the latest, I mean, not to say anything bad about like drill music or the things that people are really into now. A lot of our students are really into this music, but it's kind of like this kind of negativity, the same thing like they were pushing the misogyny, pushing the drugs, pushing the violence. But, you know, when people are coming out and saying things about healthy situation, healthy living, can that be a thing? Can this be a thing? Or people are going to lose their street credibility by talking about this? Would somebody say something about that? I'm curious.
I think over time it'll get there. We're starting to see it. It's just not as prominent. I mean, you got to think about the centuries and millenniums of this type of behavior. Like, it's always been there. It's just maybe it didn't have Instagram, maybe it didn't have Facebook. You know, you can keep going layer and layer back, MySpace, whatever. Yeah, MySpace, that's funny, but you know, you just keep going back and back, and you see the different layers of it's getting more exposed, and it's the loudest. You know, it's like the loudest in the room isn't always right, and that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the people that think that they're the loudest. They think they're the right ones. And so you got artists out there, you have people out there that talk about, you know, this ain't right, man. We shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be doing these drugs. We should be eating healthier, but they don't have the loudest voice. And you got record executives and record labels that pay more for drug use and paraphernalia, gang violence in their music. Oh yeah, yes, I'm dead serious. If you check out executives, they want what music are people going to go buy bottles to? What music are they going to go to the club and spend more money to? And if you're talking about, hey man, go heal yourself, you can live better, you can live great, doing all that, they don't want to hear that. They want to make money off of that because that's what happens. And we had artists during interviews tell us about that, what they've dealt with in that. So it's coming. It just takes time.
Yeah, we had an artist tell us that he turned down a multi-million-dollar record deal because they said, hey, we want this new record to be more street. And can you talk about drinking and doing drugs? And he's like, I don't do those things. Like, why would I? He's like, I'm from the suburbs. Like, why would I talk about this stuff? And that's what they wanted. Or Stick from Dead Prez, you know, very conscious hip hop group. He talked about how they would get sent into the white neighborhoods. And he's like, why are we getting sent to the white neighborhoods? Why aren't you sending us on tour in the Black communities? And it's because the record labels didn't want Black audiences hearing this music. It's like, oh, this is okay for white people. And so I think that's a big reason why we see hip hop in such a negative light, and some of the artists and the negative sides of like modern hip hop being elevated is because there is a concerted effort to push this sort of narrative. But you look at the history of hip hop, it's like it's always been about consciousness. And it's like, I mean, KRS-One had beef in what, 80, 6 maybe, and it's like, you know, talking about, you know, not eating meat. So it's like this has been with hip hop from the beginning, but we've seen how outside forces want to push a certain narrative, and so that's one of the reasons why they're trying to kill us. We see it as kind of like an antidote to that.
And that's why you see large record labels that promote violence of blacks. Now, mind you, the violence of the black stigma is in all the music. Guess who signs those checks though? It's all upper echelon white people that are signing these checks. And then the media will make it look like, well, look at these black people. Look what they're doing to themselves. Look what they promote. It was like, no, you're not talking about the person that cut the check for them to make that song to promote to the black people. Y'all skip that part.
Wow. Elizabeth, you have a question. You can unmute yourself and just tell us maybe where you are and welcome.
New Jersey in the New York metro area. And so I haven't seen the movie. And so I don't know if you addressed this in the movie, but I was wondering, so you had said when you were talking how the alcohol, the Burger Kings and the McDonald's and all those companies, they prey on the Black communities and the Black people, that they're the targets for advertising. I had a friend who many years ago, when she was first starting out her career, she lived in Brooklyn, and she lived in a predominantly Black section of Brooklyn. And she complained that she couldn't get, there was no major supermarket nearby. She had to go on a sub, is not convenient. But the bodegas there, she used to complain how she can't get fresh fruits and vegetables. They'd have like maybe a moldy banana, or she had very little access. And I'm just wondering if you cover in the movie, or if you have any thoughts, these national corporations that are preying on not just Black people, but minorities, to buy their products. How can we get companies, how can we get access, get people of lower socioeconomic and people, minorities, access to good foods and to education about eating well and what's good for them? Because not everybody is going to see your movie either. Are there any wealthy Black people like Oprah Winfrey or whatever who could, and she has a communications company, who could start targeting minorities for eating healthy and for getting companies to supply stores in that area with products that would be helpful to them?
I'll chime in on this one. I believe.
Sorry if that was a convoluted question. I was thinking of it.
No, it's all good. I think I brought it all into one big concentrated ball. I got it. I would say that this is when it's not up to a Black millionaire or a Black billionaire to change it. It's up to the people that are not affected to change it. Like I always say this, if it's gonna come down to animal rights, it has to be people that aren't animals to speak up. If it comes down to gay rights, it has to come down to people that aren't gay to step up and say something's wrong. If it's, the people of lower socioeconomic standing, it has to be the people that don't have that standing to come. So at the end of the day, these companies don't care who's buying their food, who's buying their products. They just care that they make their bottom line. If more people buy, you can check across the box now and see how many companies that are not vegan that have vegan products now. They're not going to be vegan. They don't care about being vegan. They just saw that there's money there now. So that's when it comes to the bodegas themselves. And you got to understand, these bodegas are struggling businesses themselves. They're not the big chains and stuff like that. But if people come in and they see, and these bodegas see that the people will buy the fresh fruits and vegetables, they will give fresh fruits and vegetables. But that also has to come from people from surrounding neighborhoods that actually want to help out, to go to these bodegas and say, hey, if you got this, I'm going to buy it, and buy up everything that they got. I know it's going to sound bad in the beginning, but buy all the fresh fruits, buy all the rice and beans they got, because they're like, man, this is selling out quick. We need to order more of this. And then it's going to be a spiraling effect. And they're going to see, man, this stuff is going faster and faster. Because guess what's going to happen? The bodega's not going to expand the store. So they only got so much room for the good stuff and the bad stuff. Right now, it's more bad stuff taking up the capacity. So what's going to happen is the more people that buy the good stuff, they're going to switch it out. At the end of the day, the bodega, the owner probably not even going to go vegan, but he's going to keep more stuff there because the money's coming from that. And that's what we have to think about. The people that aren't affected are the ones that have to stand up. Like, you got so many vegans that'll stand up for an animal, but they won't stand up for the fellow human sometimes. And we have to remember that it's all connected. We're all, I have a shirt that I made years ago and I wear it all the time. It says, we're all animals. And people are like, man, I like it. People that aren't even vegan walk up to me, man, I like that shirt. And they don't even get the whole concept of it. But that's what it is. We all have to step up.
Yeah, and on an institutional level too, it's like you could see if you're in a economically depressed area and a lot of people are on federal food assistance, you could change the federal food program. So it's like right now you can buy junk food on SNAP, what was formerly food stamps. Federal policy could easily change that and just be like, hey, you have to, this money can only be used towards healthy food. And all of those bodegas are going to stock healthy food. They're going to replace the potato chips with fruits and vegetables because that's where the money is. There's a lot of pushback from a lot of different people on that because they're like, oh, well, that's government overreach and that's the nanny state and da 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 da. But as it is right now, the government's telling you can buy garbage food. You can buy things that are poisoning you and killing you. So that's something that could happen. But I think what John said is like from a grassroots level, it's like all of us who have a voice, use our voice to help elevate those who need it.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that would mean people would get healthy if we took away
that.
That's
and
true. That would take away
true.
from like the hospitals making money.
Oh, damn. Never mind. Scrap it.
Well, we're going from the nanny state to the nanny consortium because we are supposed to stop in 4 minutes.
Okay.
Lovely closing. So I'd just like to take a kind of group conscience, especially among those in power, the people with REVs in front of their name. Do we stop and leave the 3 questions unanswered, or do we take another 10 minutes and let our incredible guests answer the other questions?
I've got 10, if Keegan's got 10.
Okay, good. Then let's see. We have something over here in the chat from Laura. What is the engagement strategy? Interfaith groups, university clubs, music-related social media posting, groups especially important, legislators, grandmothers. And if you want to expand on that, Laura, you're welcome to unmute yourself and do say so. Otherwise, we'll just let John and Keegan comment on what you wrote.
Yeah, I mean, the plan is we really need a big platform to get this film out. And then from there, it becomes much more accessible. So all of it combined, John went to a historically Black university. So going for the HBCUs, getting spiritual leaders to get behind this. Milton Mills can talk about this, especially with the Seventh-day Adventists, about promoting a plant-based diet within that community, and it should be across all communities of all faiths, because this benefits everyone, right? Other than stockholders of pharma and junk food, but yeah, it's all needed. But we're kind of sitting quiet right now as we work out things. But as soon as we have a mainstream release is when we will see and be asking for people to push it in a major way.
Okay, and I think you've kind of answered one of the other questions from Stephanie. When can we expect the movie?
Yeah.
Believe me, if you got a cousin that owns Netflix or something, please just go ahead and call. It's not us. I go live every day almost, and I always tell people, and I get people very upset in my comments, and I'm like, I want you to understand, it literally is not Keegan and I. It is not us. We're not the ones holding on to this film. So it's a network thing. But when it does happen, yeah, we're gonna need to push from everybody.
Well, you'll sure get me lining up and buying extra tickets because it's an amazing film. Elaine, last question.
Well, Great. One, thank you guys for being here. I've really, really enjoyed this discussion. My question is, how receptive do you feel the Black community is, or other communities of color are to this change? I've had a few Black female friends become ardent vegans because of the Black breast cancer issue, and how many more Black females get breast cancer and how many more don't recover from it. What do you think? How do you think the community is going to receive it and act on it?
Sorry, that was an alarm. I'm sorry about that. I believe that they have to see the evidence. I know this sounds crazy, but I can speak for the Black community. We are an evidence-based society. We have to see it in front of us. And I'm not talking about, hearing a story from some random person, because we always do it. I always say this: everybody wants change, but nobody wants to change. So it's like we want everything to happen better for us, but we're not going to be the ones to change. For instance, for me, the change for me was seeing my mother suffer. And I was like, whoa, I don't want to see that. And I think this film, it touches everybody's family in a sense, to where I talk about my mother's struggles, I talk about my uncle's struggles, and the 90 interviews that we have, half of them talk about what their family went through. And I think everybody can relate to that. We've all, no matter what color you are really, have dealt with somebody passing in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. But we chalk it up as, man, they had a long life. Michael Jackson passed away at 55, and we were like, man, he had a long life. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm about to be 45. I want a couple more years than that, if possible. So I think it has to hit home. And that's what Keegan and I really, really wanted to do with this. Is like, tug at the heart, like really see what's happening to your family. But guess what? We can change that. Now, we can't give you a 100% guarantee, but if we can improve your odds by 70% by changing what you eat, why wouldn't you do that? If I told you you had a 70% chance of getting $500,000 if you change the way you eat, everybody would do it in 5 seconds. But if you say, one of our biggest problems I always say is that we can't see the damage that we're doing to ourselves inside. So that's why we continue to do it. When you scab your knee, you see the damage you did. So you're like, I'm not gonna bang my knee on that desk again when I walk around. But since we don't see it on the inside, we just continue and continue and continue. And that's what Keegan and I are doing. We're like, no, let's go inside of this and show you what's happening to us from the inside. And I think that's why, like Keegan touched earlier, I've definitely received a lot of emails from people that saw it during that screening. They were like, oh man, I'm changing. I am changing. I actually had a guy, which I didn't even remember him. He had a different page name. And he was like, man, I thought you were full of crap. He didn't use the word crap, but he said, I thought you were full of crap. This, and that. He said, man, I see you are really out here trying to help people, man. And I appreciate you. And he didn't have to write me. He didn't. But I appreciate that he did write me to tell me that he saw the vision and he understands it. And he went vegan after watching the film.
Cool. Now, Nancy, who has seen the film twice, has some great stuff in the chat that we should be putting pressure on Netflix, letting them know how much we love the film. So, Nancy, did you want to say something really quickly as we?
Yeah, I'll be really fast. I live in Harlem, and I'm known as the vegan lady because anybody who approaches me, I'm screaming, go plant-based or eat plant foods, not animals. Meat is violence. It's not food. And I want to just say that I find a lot of people who are already vegan, and it's films very often that make them, convince them. I recommended I have a little list of films that I give to everybody along with my leaflets. And it's a list of films on the front, 5 Netflix and YouTube, and on the back are books. And people will say, oh yeah, I saw that. I saw whatever, and like What the Health. I mean, I have those 5, and they say, and that did it. So I'm really very excited about the film, and like I said, if enough of us ask on, do a search on Netflix for they're trying to kill us, I think they'll get the message.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks to everybody who had comments and questions. Thanks so much to our guests. So Keegan and John, if you could put in the chat your social media or where you would like people to be looking out for you, that'll be cool. And then I will turn it over to Reverend Sarah for our close.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Eric and Keegan and John, and thank you all for being here tonight. We're just going to wrap a little bit here with two quick thoughts. Tonight's a great reminder that the fight for injustice is complex and never ending, and we may not see it all. So we're required to continually educate ourselves about things that we don't know about and stick with people who can help us learn, but also to do our own education to seek that out. I'm reminded of the words of Martin Luther King when he said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. So I invite you to take a deep breath as we close in a short prayer. Connecting in that single garment of destiny, we are all gathered in here today with our speakers and with all of you. And this prayer is written by Alan Stewart Patton, a South African author and anti-apartheid activist that I'm drawing on today. Open our eyes that we may see the needs of others. Open our ears so that we may hear their cries. Open our hearts so that they need not be without assistance and without support in times of hardship and distress. Let us not be afraid to defend the weak because of the anger of the strong, nor afraid to defend the poor because of the anger of the rich. Show us where love and hope and faith are needed, and use us to bring them to those places. Please open all eyes and all ears that we may be able to do the work of peace. Amen, and so it is. Thank you all for joining us tonight for the Compassion Consortium. We would love to see you February 27th. Dr. Milton Mills, who was mentioned so many times tonight, will be in the house. So please join us February 27th as we continue this conversation. Good night.